Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, all on his own tonight. JB had something he had to take care of, couldn't be here for our postgame reaction podcast. And so you've got to put up with me as I guide you through a recap, summary, and maybe a little bit of therapy for Argos fans who are struggling with what was undoubtedly the toughest loss of the season for the Double Blue. Before we get into the recap and everything else, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing. It was awesome to see so many of you down at Something in the Water Brewing today. It's a great stop pregame. There's a game coming up next week against the Montreal Alouettes right here at BMO Field. If you get a chance to drop by Something in the Water Brewing on your way to BMO Field, it's the perfect stop right in Liberty Village. And to see so many Argos fans and so many listeners from our podcast down there was really moving. Honestly, I was blown away by the support, and I have been since we got into this advertising relationship with Something in the Water Brewing. You, the listener, have been fantastic supporting them, and I love to see fans and listeners support products that support the CFL and support your team, in this case, the Toronto Argonauts. So again, thank you from me and from Something in the Water. But it's just one of those things where it's the perfect setup. It's the best place to go before a game, and they've got so many great beers to choose from. So hopefully, if you didn't get down there today, hopefully you can be there next Saturday when Toronto hosts Montreal. Let's get into this recap. This one it's going to be tough for Argos fans, for Argos players. This is going to be a long week as they wait patiently for the Alouettes to come to town. The fact of the matter is the Toronto Argonauts had no business not only losing this game to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, but losing the other two as well. The Hamilton Tiger Cats have swept the Toronto Argonauts in 2024 3-0. And you look up and down the roster of both teams, there really isn't a comparison. The teams aren't that close. But football's a funny thing sometimes. Sports in general, I think you see this. But in football in particular, I talked about this a bit last week when Toronto went into BC and for the second time this season had really no trouble at all dismantling a very good Lions team. Sometimes matchups can really dictate the game for between two teams. And the Argos don't match up that well with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They do match up very well against the BC Lions. But even still, this is not a team that the Toronto Argonauts can lose to. They just can't. They can't allow themselves, for a team that imagines themselves, and I think correctly so, being able to play with anybody in the league. They can't lose to a team that is struggling with the worst record in the CFL. You just can't. And to lose 3 times is inexcusable. So we'll go through why that happened and everything else. But it's got to be a frustrating thing. And I think what makes this loss more frustrating than the other two is the fact that Hamilton didn't really win the other 2 games as much as Toronto blew it. They made terrible mistakes. They came out flat. They weren't ready to play, and Hamilton was. And the difference in those first 2 losses at Tim Hortons Field was that the Ticats were playing and the Argos weren't playing. And so they got down by 17 points, clawed their way back, and dropped it in the end. This game was really different. In this game, the Argos offense played well. The team as a whole didn't make a lot of mistakes, but the Ticats played one of the better games I've seen them play all season. And Bo Levi Mitchell had, without question, his best game of the season. He was sensational tonight. Every one of his throws was just about on point. There was one throw that got away from him. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, he had an amazing game start to finish and just found a way to get the job done again and again and again, dropping it in over coverage. There were at least 4 or 5 plays where he was able to just thread the needle, get that ball in there, and find a way to keep moving the sticks down the field. So a lot of credit to him. If you're going to have any kind of star of the game tonight, without question, it is Bo Levi Mitchell. He was the best player on the field for both teams. So let me get into a recap. We'll go through the start, the middle, the finish, everything that went right, everything that went wrong. We'll start it on the offensive side of the ball. I thought Chad Kelly played a great game, not as good as his game last week in BC. That was his best game of the season, but I think this has to be his second best. And the numbers don't necessarily blow you away like they did with his 460 something yards in Ottawa in a loss, or his 322 in a squeaker of a win, or his 322 in a loss in Hamilton. 17 of 26 for 255 yards, a touchdown, and interception. Let's talk about some of those elements. So Chad Kelly's touchdown pass was a remarkable thing. It was a brilliant play. He extended the play, made something happen, found Mackay Polk in the end zone. Great throw. He really only had one bad play on the whole night, and it was that interception. That did play a factor that led to Hamilton points, but really that was the only play that I can think of off the top of my head that was a negative for him. He rolled out to his right, and it was hard for me to see exactly what he was thinking. I think he was waiting for Dave Unger to come across from the other side of the field. Unger never quite got there. Chad threw back across his body, and it went right to Stavros Katsantonis. I didn't think Unger was at all close enough to make a play. It's possible he was thinking Mackay Polk would be there. Mackay Polk fell on the play. He lost his balance, had contact with a Hamilton DB. Not a penalty, but something that clearly disrupted Polk's route. Maybe that's what Chad Kelly was looking for. I can't tell. It's tough for me to say that that's what he was looking for. But when the ball was that far from an Argo receiver, I put that on him. He's got to keep that ball. He can't make that throw. But to even remotely think you can blame Chad Kelly for this outcome is flawed. He played a tremendous game, was really good with his decision making. The one thing I did want to talk about is his slow start tonight. And slow is relative. He started 0 for 4. He had that interception. What's interesting to me about that is Toronto was running the football extremely well when Chad was struggling to throw. And what I'm getting at here is I wonder how much Toronto's determination to run the football, which I want to praise. Like, that's not a bad thing. They were running extremely well. 2 weeks in a row now. Coach Dinwiddie's done a great job relying on the run. But I do wonder, with them running so heavily in that first half, if that maybe prevented Chad from being able to get into a rhythm. At every level Chad Kelly has played at, he has been the guy. He's been the reason, the motor behind the offense, the reason they've won. And he's used to just dropping back and throwing again and again and again. Remember, this is a guy that had 56 passing attempts a couple of weeks ago in Ottawa. And to only have had 4 or 5 passing attempts in his first several drives, including drives that actually went down the field. And, these aren't 2 and outs we're talking about. I wonder if that prevented him from really getting into a rhythm. It's something to think about. Usually a run game helps a quarterback tremendously. It draws defenders in. It opens up receivers downfield. Hamilton wasn't really going for that. I think it was kind of interesting to watch their defensive philosophy. They didn't adjust it much. They, for the most part, were running a 3-man line and not even going after Chad Kelly. They had no sacks on the night, but it clearly wasn't one of their goals. They weren't trying to sack Chad Kelly. They were doing their best to kind of keep him in the pocket and send 9 guys into coverage to make it really tough to find windows to throw in. But that's what allowed Toronto to run the football so effectively. And I love that they stuck with it. This probably was the most rushing attempts we saw from Toronto all season. They have 23 carries tonight. That is a lot of running from a CFL team. And that's especially from a Coach Dinwiddie-led CFL team or a Chad Kelly quarterback CFL team. You just don't see Chad Kelly and Coach Dinwiddie teams go to the ground that many times. So did that play a factor? I don't know. But it's just something to think about, maybe something to consider going forward. The running was spread out beautifully. I love the job that the rotation, the fact that they've got 3 very different backs. Kadeem Carey, the sort of all-round star back. Adeboboye, who's the pounder, the north-south guy who gets vertical in a hurry and is hard to take down. And then McMahon, who can make anyone miss in the smallest of spaces. I thought they were used really well. They were used very interchangeably. Carey with 7 carries. It's not like they were pounding him into the ground. 7 carries for 65. Adeboboye right on his heels, 6 carries for 26. McMahon, 5 carries for 29. Chad Kelly had 5 carries himself, couple in quarterback sneaks, 19 yards total, 2 touchdown runs, and one of those touchdown runs was a really heads-up play where it was going to be a pass. He dropped back, had a nice pump fake, got his defender in the air, and then took some contact as he drove through to rush for the touchdown. But that running game usually is going to cause teams to get out of their formation and to put more defenders in the box, allowing you to throw more effectively. But that's not what happened. Instead, they stayed. They were true to themselves and decided we're just going to keep dropping guys into the coverage and hopefully not have any big explosive plays. For the most part, that worked, but there were a couple that got away from them. Chad Kelly, 17 of 26 for 255. Couple drops in there that he's, obviously those go as incompletions for him, but I just thought he was accurate. He was making good decisions, firing the football well, had that touchdown pass in there too, and was spreading it around pretty effectively. Coxie was his guy, though clearly was something he wanted to get going. And Coxie was there, not for anything deep, but he was there on a lot of comeback routes. He drew Jamal Peters a lot tonight. And time again, Coxie would show deep and then jam on the brakes, come back. And that's generally where Chad Kelly was finding him. Coxie, 7 targets, 5 catches, 45 yards, but his longest play was only 12 yards. And that's really unlike DeMonte Coxie. Peters was trying to keep Coxie in front of him. So there's some good and bad from that. Now, the one big play, and this was one of the many turning points in the game, was when DeMonte Coxie had an opportunity to catch and run with the football. But like you've seen so many times, if you've watched football for a long time, you've seen this happen again and again and again, where the receiver tries to do something before he secured the football. That's exactly what happened to DeMonte Coxie. He had first down yardage. He had his hands up. Ball was right in the hands. And because his defender slipped and fell, he's now looking to make a big play out of that. And he just turns his head before the ball got there, ends up falling to the ground harmlessly. It's an incomplete pass. And Toronto ended up having to give the ball back to Hamilton instead of being in Hamilton territory for what could have been points. That was big. That's a big play. That's a big difference maker. I don't think it is the difference in the game. If you're going to point fingers in this loss, you're probably pointing mostly at the defense. I think anytime you give up 33 points to Hamilton Tiger Cats, that's probably where you're going to look, because these weren't points that came off Argos turnovers. They weren't points off pick sixes or kickoff return touchdowns. These were points scored by the Hamilton offense, only one score of which came from a short field that was handed to them. So again, I don't want to be too hard on Coxie. He had a couple of really nice plays in this game as well. A couple of plays where he went north-south after catching the football and got first down. So not his best game statistically, no question. But he was the primary target for Chad Kelly tonight. DeVaris Daniels had a heck of a game, mostly because of that one huge play, but he had 4 catches on 5 targets. That 66-yarder was a thing of beauty. I'll recall that one for you. Chad Kelly rolling out of the pocket to his right, DeVaris coming from miles away off to the corner, and he got in behind coverage, and Chad just launched it. It went so far in the air. DeVaris caught it in stride. It was a perfectly thrown ball. Chad Kelly's best pass of the night, and that contributed big time to DeVaris's 118 yards. Argos receivers, other than that, even though Chad was spreading it around, nobody else had a standout day. Mackay Polk, 5 targets, but only 2 catches in there, 42 yards, 1 touchdown. That touchdown was the thing of beauty. There's also another nice play on a dig route. Actually, both of those were on dig routes coming across the field. And once again, his defender lost his footing. Polk caught the ball, turned upfield for what I think ended up being a 28-yard gain. And so, he had those 2 nice plays, but other than that, they had trouble connecting. And going down the line, Tommy Neal, 2 catches, 24 yards. He had 2 solid contributions. Both of those catches, one of them turning into first down. One of them was, I think, just a bit short. They ended up converting the first down the next play. Kevin Mattal used early twice, and they never went back to him again. He had 2 great catches where he got upfield in a hurry, bowled over defenders, broke a tackle, and yet wasn't used again. They didn't go back to him. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a problem. Again, it wasn't like the Toronto offense wasn't the issue, and it's not like they were having trouble moving the ball late or anything. They weren't. What they were doing was fine. It's just interesting that everything was working for Toronto on offense seemingly, and yet they came up short. It's just so you look up and down the stat sheet and you think back to all the possessions the Argos offense had. It's just not a game you're accustomed to seeing the Argos drop, because this defense has been so strong for them, not just this season, going back several years now. They just don't typically have performances like this. So I think that's what makes this so tough to swallow. Continuing on down, Deontay McMahon, 1 catch and 1 target for 3 yards. Unger with only 1 catch for 2 yards. I want to talk about him for a moment. Unger and Kelly seem to, who are almost always like telepathically intertwined or connected, whatever the right way to say it is. They're always on the same page together. You see Chad Kelly go to Unger time and time again to the wide side of the field. He's been pretty invisible the last couple of weeks. And what stood out to me tonight was two plays in particular where Dave Ungerer struggled to communicate with Chad Kelly. Both plays, Chad Kelly was rolling out, once to his right, once to his left. He had Ungerer as the far man closest to the sideline. And on both plays, seemed to send Ungerer deep. Chad Kelly does this a lot because what he wants Ungerer to do here is what we've seen him do time and time again. He wants the corner to be in conflict. So to, again, maybe describe this a bit more accurately, Chad Kelly's rolling out. There's nobody left over there but the corner and his receiver, in this case, Ungerer. And so as Chad gets outside the pocket, he starts pointing to Ungerer, like, go deep. Why he wants Ungerer to go deep is he wants Ungerer to take that cornerback with him. And if the corner goes with Ungerer, Chad Kelly would have run. He would have tucked the ball, run for a first down. If the corner comes up to make a play on Kelly, then it's just an easy throw and catch to a wide open Dave Ungerer downfield. But on both occasions, Ungerer stayed. He's doing, I think, what he's taught, quarterbacks in trouble come back to the quarterback, but that's not the way Chad Kelly wants to play this. When he's in trouble, he looks deep. It happens several times in this game where he's under pressure and he's not looking for a dump off. He's not looking for you coming back to him. He's looking for a home run. And on both of those plays, they would have either turned into Chad Kelly first down runs or big plays to Ungerer if the corner had decided to come after the quarterback. So that was a little bit of miscommunication between guys that are so rarely on different pages. Before we get into looking at the defense and some of the other problems that were going on for the Argos tonight, I kind of want to just break down those last few minutes of the game. This was a back and forth game. If you could put your Argos fandom aside for a moment, just look at this game objectively as a football fan. This was a fantastic football game, like 6 or 7 lead changes back and forth. It was won on the last play of the game with a long field goal. Everything about this game was excellent from a football perspective. But let's take a look at those last couple of minutes. One of the mistakes I think Toronto made was hurrying too much when there was 2 minutes and 10 seconds left on the clock. So Toronto took over with decent field position, 2 minutes and 10 seconds on the clock. They just needed a score to go up. They were up by 1 at that point, 31-30. And it confused me that Toronto was running to the line because what I said on the broadcast, I said to my broadcast partner, Mike Hogan, like this is, you've got your full range of offensive plays. 2 minutes and 10 seconds in the CFL in the fourth quarter is an endless amount of time. You don't need to think about the clock too much. I actually, at that point, would have been not necessarily snapping it at 1 or anything like that, but I'm actually trying to use up clock because you have to think this is our last possession. And the way that Hamilton was moving the ball tonight, you don't want to give it back to them with any time on the clock, especially if you're thinking they only need a field goal. So you're trying to take that right down. And it was just interesting to me that with 1 minute and 30 seconds left, Toronto was already like in striking distance of the end zone. And that was just far too quickly to get down the field. From there, they decided to go back-to-back passes. Both ended up being incomplete, stopping the clock, and that left Hamilton with just a world of time to do some damage with. But let's talk about a couple of those plays. So at the end, Toronto's got the ball. Chad Kelly in trouble, rolls out to his left, throws it towards Mackay Polk. It's off target. This has no chance of being caught, but Polk goes to the ground, and an official throws a flag for pass interference. For the record, I do not think this was pass interference. Neither did Coach Milanovic, who threw his challenge flag. It went to the command center, and I think correctly so. The command center overturned it, so there was no pass interference on the play. The clock now stopped, and Toronto was in a situation where they ended up having to kick a field goal instead of being first and goal from the 1, where they almost certainly scored a touchdown, and I really do think would have won the game there. There was so many plays tonight where if this just goes a little bit differently, it's going to end the game. And that one was that was one. Now, the reason I bring it up, because yes, it was the correct call. The command center did what they're supposed to do. That's what the command center is supposed to be for. They did their job correctly in my mind. What's interesting about it is they've been very hesitant to turn over calls over the last few weeks since the sort of debacle of that Ottawa-Saskatchewan game several weeks ago, where the command center was all anyone talked about for a few weeks. they've been very hesitant in even on plays where I thought were pretty clear. Like that looks like a pretty clear overturn to me. The command center left it alone. And so I actually wondered, even though, and looking at the replay, I felt pretty sure that Mackay Polk slipped more than anything else. Like, to me, what it looked like, BMO Field's a weird place to play. It's grass right up into the end zone, and then suddenly it turns to turf on the north end zone. And it's really easy to suddenly lose your footing. You forget. And Mackay Polk, a rookie, it's not like he's been playing here for season after season. He's only played on this field like, 7 times. And so he's running down on grass, goes to jam on the brakes, but he's on turf now. I think that's what happened. I think that's why he lost his feet. Now, when you look at it, Richard Leonard does put his hands on Polk, and then Polk drops to the ground. I don't think there's any way that Richard Leonard caused Polk to fall. Yes, his hands were there, but it just didn't look like that to me. So again, like I've said 3 times now, I'm repeating myself, but I do think that they should have picked up the flag. The command center did the right thing. It's just, I was interested to see. I wasn't prepared to bet that we'd see that overturned, because I've seen the command center, I guess, unless they're 100% sure, show themselves to be very hesitant in these last few weeks to overturn a play, especially such a big play like that, because that was the difference in the ball game. But I think the correct decision was made. I applaud it. I want the command center to do exactly that. It's unfortunate that it hurt the Argos in this case, but that to me is what they're for. That was the correct call. Toronto ends up kicking the field goal. They go up by a single point, but there was so much time. And the way Bo Levi Mitchell was playing tonight, it just, to me, it didn't feel like it was in doubt. But where I do want to maybe turn some criticism to the Toronto Argonauts defense is I just didn't feel like the secondary played tight enough tonight. It felt like all night long, Bo Levi Mitchell had receivers 5 or 6 yards downfield who were wide open, and he was going to happily take those checkdowns all night long. Now, that's part of Toronto's defensive philosophy. They are hesitant to get beat over the top. They were beat over the top last game by Hamilton, and they were determined not to let that happen again. And this usually works. Like the bend but don't break defense is often successful because quarterbacks don't have the patience to go 5 yards at a time down the field. Offensive coordinators don't have the patience to go 5 yards at a time down the field. And so this strategy is a successful one generally. But Mitchell's a veteran quarterback. He's been playing good football this season. To me, this was his best game of the season. He was so patient and so accurate with the football. It did not surprise me that he's able to drive down the field and connect first down after first down, get the team in field goal range, and then kick that 48-yard field goal for the Hamilton win. There's one play, though, that I want to highlight, and this brings up a bigger problem for the Argos defense tonight. There was what I perceived to be a bust on a crucial 3rd down, and was it 3rd and 3 at the time that they converted? It was either 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 4. And had this ball fallen incomplete, had it been broken up, had there been a sack, any negative play for Hamilton, that's it. That's ball game. Hamilton dropped back to pass, and Mitchell had a wide open receiver in the flats. Nobody near him, and he just threw an easy completed pass for a 1st down, and that was the beginning of the end for the Argonauts. I bring that play up because on 2 other occasions, it looked to me like there were busts, exact same busts, where nobody seemed to have flats responsibility. And that would be my criticism of the Argos defense tonight. Like, the busts are different, but having to stick to guys. If the Argos left a Hamilton player open with 5 yards of space around him, Mitchell was going to find him tonight. He was on point, and he did not miss anything. He saw it all. And on those 3 plays where there was no flats defender, everybody bailed deep. And I'll tell you, like, I can tell you the type of play they ran. It was the same every time. Basically had 2 receivers running deep press, clearing out, and then the most inside receiver, or in some cases the back, would leak out into the flats, and there was just nobody left, not for miles. It was a linebacker who had to come over, or a safety who had to come flying in from deep to make the tackle. And to have that play happen a few different times, and in a crucial situation like that, where you've got defenders looking at each other like, what happened on that play? That's just not something we've seen from the Argos defense with regularity this season. So it was disappointing to see for sure. The other plays where I might look to the Argos, there was one deep pass that Bo Levi Mitchell hit. I think it was a 45-yarder to Bridges down the sideline where it looked like there was a miscommunication, where the corner thought he had help over top, but there wasn't help over top. So that was one of them. But the biggest thing to me was just in giving too much space. I really felt tonight that the way Mitchell was throwing the football, you had to play tighter in man and you had to lock in. Even when you're in zone coverage, it had to become man sooner, because if there was any space at all, even if it was just for a 3 or 4 yard gain, Mitchell was going to take it, and he was on point. Man, he was throwing the football well. A few times where he just pulled the chute on a football just like an inch over a linebacker's outstretched hands and dropped into his receiver. He played a tremendous game. It was just so accurate. And this is maybe typical of the games that Toronto has lost this year. The one bad throw Bo Levi Mitchell had tonight was picked off by the Argos, and it was negated by a pass interference penalty on Tunde Adeleke, a penalty that didn't matter. It didn't need to be there. This was an overthrown ball. Mitchell threw the ball, and it just flew out of his hands for whatever reason, similar to Chad Kelly's pick, and sailed over the receiver's head. But Adeleke got there early, hit that intended receiver, who couldn't have caught that if you'd left him wide alone. It was way over his head. It gets picked off, run back a little bit, and it is negated, though, because of that pass interference penalty on Adeleke. Turns into Hamilton points instead of Argos points going the other way. That was one of many, many crucial issues in tonight's game for the Argos defense. And that's, you look at that, turnovers are such a big part of football. That was Bo's one turnover-worthy play, but it was negated by penalty. Chad had one turnover-worthy play, and it was picked off by Hamilton. So Hamilton getting the job done, Toronto falling just a little bit short. Let's talk about some of that Bo Levi Mitchell's success. So 31 of 40 for 362 and a touchdown. I don't know. I've already praised him tonight, and he deserves nothing but. I think you got to shout out James Butler, too. It is really hard to run against this Argos defense. 11 carries for 58 yards. That's a huge performance. Litre struggled tonight. 7 carries for 8 yards, but he did have a touchdown in there in which he was barely touched. But I want to talk about, I'll get back to that in a second. I'm going to talk about the short yardage and where Toronto's defense had their highlights tonight. I'll get to that in just a second. But Bridges was all over the place. 12 targets, only 6 receptions on that. They did have trouble with some of that timing, but he had 82 yards, including that big 45-yard play. Butler was big out of the backfield, and that's really the difference that he offers the Tiger Cats, not being able to go with Greg Bell this week. He was injured. Butler, 6 catches on 6 targets. They were almost all those easy passes out into the flat, where he was able to get some yards after the catch, and Argos defenders too far from him. But like I said, this was a night to be aggressive for the Argos. This was a night where they had to come up and just lock on to receivers. And if they gave up a big play, they gave up a big play. But you can't let Mitchell sit back there and throw freely. There were only 2 Argos sacks on this night, and most of the time they just didn't get close because Mitchell's a veteran quarterback. He could see when they were sending blitzes, and every single time he went to the right spot. If they're blitzing a halfback off the right side, well, that's where he was going with the football, with a quick 5-yard throw that would turn into a 9 or 11-yard gain and move the sticks. And they just needed to find a way to tighten that up and make it more difficult. Force those Hamilton receivers to beat you. Force the Hamilton receivers to get away from what is a very fast Toronto Argonauts secondary. And they didn't do that. They were content to leave the Tiger Cats in space, and it didn't work for them. Let me talk about that goal line stand by the Argos, because this was, even in a loss, one thing that you have to reflect back on positively, because we've seen this happen to Toronto. It happened against Saskatchewan a few weeks ago in the same building. Hamilton got the ball 1st and 1 in what looked like would be a sure touchdown. And play after play, the Argos came up and made the stop. Kassar came through. Sereznik came through. They stood tall on the line, and Litre, the short yardage specialist, got stopped again and again and again. Once fumbling the football, getting it back somehow, but still being stopped behind the line. And then on what looked like it was going to be the play that where everything went backwards, Robbie Smith lined up with his finger offside on Hamilton running this unbalanced line where they line up quickly. The Argos had to quickly adjust to it. And what I mean by unbalanced line, like they had the center, Bo Levi Mitchell, right underneath the center, or whoever it might have been Tagovailoa. I don't even remember who the quarterback was on that play, but he's lined up on the center. There's only one player to the right of the center, and it's a receiver, basically playing right guard. Nobody else on that side of him. It was a quick pitch out left with all sorts of blockers out there, and the Argos stuffed them for a loss. But because of that offside, it was first and goal from the one again. And you're like, okay, well, now Hamilton's going to run it in clearly. They went backwards. They lost a yard on first down, lost 2 yards on second down, and ended up settling to kick a field goal. That, to me, like, I thought that at the time was going to be the turning point. To me, like, I was saying to myself, like, this is why Toronto's going to win that game. What an incredible momentum changing stop by the Argos defense. So it's not like they had a flat night and were invisible all night long. That was a tremendous series, and something like, we just haven't seen that from the Argonauts all season long. That you don't see that from team. You go for years without seeing a defensive stand like that. That was special. 5 straight plays to send the Tiger Cats backwards and prevent them from getting in the end zone from a yard out. That was magical. But at the same time, that was the series where the Argos did their job defensively. The rest of the night, it just didn't happen for them. They weren't able to force punts. They gave up points, and when they needed a stop, they couldn't get it done. I really thought we'd see an inspired Argos defense tonight because of the return of Wynton McManis and Jared Brinkman, 2 of their best defensive players. And it's not like they played badly. McManis led the game in tackles with 8 tackles. Played a great game, but he didn't really have that. You're waiting for him, and it's not really fair. You can't put this on McManis at all, but you're waiting for that one big play where he tips a pass that gets picked, or he picks it himself, anticipates a route, and he's going the other way, or he's getting a big sack. And that sort of big McManis play didn't happen tonight. It's not on him. He played a great game. He had 8 tackles, but I think everybody felt like this would be a game that the Argos defense won. Instead of it being a game that the Argos defense lost. It went the complete opposite direction. And I think maybe a case of the Argos defense looking too much to McManis and Brinkman, like, you guys are finally back, show us what you do, make plays, and maybe, not getting it done themselves. And there's still some shout outs here. Like, I thought defensively, I thought Benji Franklin had a pretty good game. I don't know where the bust came from, so maybe I'm highlighting someone that had a bust. I didn't see on any of the busts who would have been responsible because everybody dropped back. There were no indicators, but I thought Benji Franklin had a good game. He made some great tackles. It stopped, was it Tuck? He stopped in the backfield, or might have been Litre. He's one of the 2 of them. He stopped in the backfield, and McFadden also made a couple nice stops, broke up a quick receiver screen. So guys did have some good games out there in the Toronto defense, but from a game that we were thinking was going to be dominated by the Argos D, it just wasn't to be. It wasn't there for them tonight. All right, let me go. I don't have JB here, so I can't even collect my thoughts. And I want to just go back through and make sure I'm sure I've missed something massive, some big play that I haven't talked about at all here tonight. But let me address a couple special teams things before we call this a night. They were missing Janarian Grant tonight. He might have been a difference maker because it seems like at least once a game he has a big return that sets up points, and they just simply weren't getting that from the combination of Deonta McMahon and Dave Unger. It's not that they did badly; they were fine. Unger with 2 punt returns for 15 yards, averaging 7.5. That's fine. McMahon with 4 kickoff returns, 65 yards. That's fine. But none of them were plays where you're like, oh my goodness, this is setting up a Toronto score. The one big return McMahon had was called back due to a hold. So, and that was, it was a good call on that as well. Flags coming up from all over the field. So that part was a bit lacking. But I can't put the loss on the Argos return specialist. That'd be ludicrous. Liam Haralahu missed a field goal. I can't put it on him either, because while you want to see him hit every kick, that guy has been money the second half of the season. He hit 24 of his last 25 coming into this game, and that one he missed was on a game-winning rouge where the priority was to get it over the uprights and out the back of the end zone. He wasn't even trying to put the field goal through. He's just trying to get that single. So he hasn't missed a field goal in who knows how long. And for him to come out there and have that one miss, it was the difference on the scoreboard. You look at it and say, well, 33-31, that field goal, that's an Argos win. It doesn't work like that. This was early in the game. Was that a first quarter missed field goal, I think. And so, who knows how the game turns out? Butterfly effect, things are all over the place. You can't place that loss on Haralahu. But if you're looking for, do they get even just a sliver of the pie of blame? Yeah, I think you can give some certainly to special teams, some for offense for that one pick, that one turnover. But I think mostly you're kind of looking at the defense. And it's been so rare this season, and really in Coach Dinwiddie's time as head coach for the Argos, that you've been able to point to the defense and say, what was going on there? They just weren't on today. And for whatever reason, it's one of those matchup things. Hamilton has their number. Their best 3 games of the season were against the Toronto Argonauts. So actually, I don't know if that's fair, because they did have that one good game against the Red Blacks. Was it last week? Is last week had a great game against the Red Blacks, but they've found a way to deliver within the division. They played the Red Blacks well. They played the Argos well 3 times. One of those things where you look at BC and how well Toronto plays against the BC Lions. They're a great team, and Toronto demolished them twice. Had their number. Those games were never in doubt. And you look at other teams where Calgary came from behind and beat the Argos in Calgary. And I think Calgary's not a team that should be able to play with Toronto. And I don't think the Tiger Cats are a team that should be able to play for Toronto with Toronto. They have 3 straight wins, but they just happen to match up really well against the Argonauts. So, an Argos loss. They're not in trouble by any means, but now there's a problem. And like I said off the top, this game is one that they needed to win, because had they won the game, they could have focused on Ottawa, who would have been only 1 point ahead of them in the standings going to their game against Montreal tomorrow night. Instead, they have to keep checking that rear view mirror, because they've got Hamilton just a few steps back. Not only are they sitting there, they've got the tiebreaker. They've had that tiebreaker won for a few weeks now, and this didn't do anything to help that. So they're watching Hamilton behind them. They're still chasing Ottawa ahead of them, but they need favors now. They need Montreal to hand them a loss tomorrow night just to keep that dream alive of hosting a playoff game. But there's still now the open possibility of having to look in the rearview mirror at the Hamilton Tiger Cats closing in on them. And that is not where the Toronto Argonauts wanted to be after tonight, because this just isn't a place they lose. Like BMO Field, their record is outstanding here. They came into this game 5-1 at BMO Field. They're only lost to Montreal, and have over the last, since the pandemic, they have the second best record. It was at home. It was only Winnipeg who's lost only 4 times. Coming into tonight, I believe Toronto only had 6 losses at home here at BMO Field. So just a strange thing. It's just one of those things this season. I don't know what it is. 2024, the Argonauts cannot beat the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They will be happy never to see them again, because you take those matchups away. This is a very different Argos season, and this is a very different Ticats season. You add 3 wins and take away 3 losses to the Argos, do vice versa with the Ticats. Man, this year looks very, very different. 33-31, Ticats over the Argonauts. That's the final score here from BMO Field. For the absent JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.